I was terminated before I could finish explaining why a 28-year-old business administration graduate with zero security clearance had no legal authority to handle classified military software. They truly believed they had sent me packing with nothing more than a cardboard box and an empty promise of severance. What they failed to grasp was that every single critical line of code inside their $1.8 billion defense architecture still bore my legal fingerprints. And the architectural clock was already ticking down towards zero. My name is Nathan Vance. I am 54 years old, and at exactly 8:15 on a humid Wednesday morning, my 18-year career as senior systems architect at Apex Defense Systems was brought to an abrupt and calculated halt. Here is the fundamental truth about working in defense contracting for nearly 2 decades. You start to believe that institutional loyalty means something. You start to assume that delivering flawless engineering will protect you from toxic office politics brewing in corporate suites upstairs. I was profoundly wrong about that. I had walked into Chief Executive Officer Gerald Thornton's top-floor executive suite, expecting our scheduled monthly security debriefing regarding Defense Core, the proprietary military logistics and encrypted communications engine I had designed from scratch. The software managed real-time tactical logistics and high-level encrypted communications for primary defense contractors, processing data worth hundreds of millions of dollars across multiple active theater deployments worldwide. When I stepped into the corner executive suite, Gerald Thornton was nervously pacing behind his massive mahogany desk. In 18 years of working under his executive leadership, I had learned that Gerald only paced when the board of directors was putting immense pressure on his quarterly balance sheet, or when he was preparing to execute a corporate move he knew was morally compromised. He did not ask me to sit down. He did not offer coffee. He simply smoothed his silk tie and adjusted his designer glasses before addressing me with an uncomfortable degree of forced corporate warmth. "Nathan," Gerald began, clearing his throat loudly as he adjusted his cufflinks, "I need you to assume immediate operational responsibility for a vital special assignment starting this morning. My son Julian is officially joining our senior executive engineering leadership team next week." Julian Thornton, the chief executive officer's 28-year-old son, had recently completed a Master of Business Administration degree paid for entirely by his father's personal wealth. Julian had spent the past 3 months posting long-winded essays on professional social networks about how legacy engineering thinking in defense technology was holding back organizational agility and how modern artificial intelligence frameworks could seamlessly replace 20 years of institutional experience. Just last week, Julian had publicly bragged online about how executive authority meant cutting through bureaucratic red tape to modernize outdated government platforms. "I want you to bring Julian entirely up to speed on the underlying architecture of defense core," Gerald continued, his voice adopting a smooth tone that he usually reserved for institutional investors and board members. "Show him the foundational codebase, hand over the administrative root access protocols, demonstrate the security layers, and ensure he can independently present the architecture to visiting government auditors." Let me explain something critical about Defense Core. Defense Core is not some off-the-shelf cloud infrastructure project that a corporate trainee can master by watching online tutorials or attending a weekend coding bootcamp. We are talking about military-grade cybersecurity designed under strict federal defense regulations with 23 distinct interconnected layers of encrypted validation protocols. I had spent 18 years of my life building this platform from an initial napkin draft. My Air Force Communications Unit had conceptualized during deployment to a comprehensive defense infrastructure supporting mission-critical operations across federal agencies. "Gerald," I stated carefully, keeping my voice level calm and professional, "Defense Core processes classified military intelligence and tactical logistics. Julian does not possess secret or top-secret security clearance under federal defense guidelines, and these underlying systems require years of hands-on defense engineering experience to manage safely. Giving an uncleared individual administrative root access violates core federal contracting compliance." That administrative issue is actively being managed, Gerald interrupted, cutting me off with a sharp wave of his hand. His security clearance application has been submitted for expedited executive processing. The board of directors agrees that fresh executive leadership is precisely what Apex needs to streamline our operational overhead. Fresh executive leadership. That was corporate doublespeak for my son, needs a high-paying executive title to justify his salary. And your 18 years of sweat equity look like a convenient ladder for him to climb. Gerald, I am currently finalizing the upcoming defense renewal contract, I reminded him, holding his gaze steadily. That is a $400 million contract with the Pentagon, and the formal demonstration is scheduled for 11 o'clock this morning. If our security architecture fails audit or shows unauthorized access, the entire renewal falls apart. Perhaps an internal training coordinator can walk Julian through high-level organizational charts while I focus on securing our primary source of corporate revenue. Julian's onboarding is your primary directive now, Gerald snapped, his voice dropping all pretense of warmth as an aggressive edge emerged. Julian represents the future leadership of Apex Defense Systems. Your personal feelings regarding corporate succession planning are entirely irrelevant to executive management. I stood straight, adjusting my posture, feeling the heavy weight of my physical security badge resting against my chest. That badge granted me unrestricted physical and digital access to encrypted federal servers that Julian Thornton was not legally authorized to access. I cannot execute that directive, Gerald, I said firmly. Defense Corps is not a sandbox for corporate nepotism. We are handling national security protocols that took nearly 2 decades to build. Your son lacks basic systems security fundamentals, and handing him root access exposes Apex to severe federal liability and immediate breach of contract. Gerald's face flushed a deep crimson. The veins along his neck bulged against his collar. Are you sitting in my office explicitly refusing a direct executive order from the chief executive officer of this corporation? I am fulfilling my legal obligation to protect corporate assets and federal security protocols, I answered cleanly. The exact same obligation I have faithfully upheld for 18 years. Gerald did not hesitate. He slammed his hand onto his intercom button and barked into the speaker. Send human resources and corporate security up to my office immediately. He turned back to face me, his eyes cold and devoid of any remaining professional respect. He looked at me like a man who had made his decision long before I had walked through his door. Nathan Vance, Gerald stated in a measured, icy tone. Your persistent inability to align with our evolving executive structure, combined with your insubordinate refusal to execute direct corporate directives, has rendered your position as senior systems architect entirely untenable. You are hereby terminated for cause, effective immediately at 8:15 in the morning. The words echoed in the large office. In a normal situation, such a sudden termination after 18 years of dedicated service would have devastated me. But it did not hit me that way. Perhaps it was because I had been quietly anticipating this exact moment ever since Gerald had launched his executive restructuring initiative 6 months ago. I understand your position, Gerald, I replied calmly. I will require 10 minutes to lock down my development environments and draft formal transition documentation for the engineering department. That will not be necessary, Gerald said, a cruel smile touching his lips. Corporate information technology has already been instructed to execute immediate revocation of all your credentials. You will not touch another keyboard inside this facility. Your access privileges were permanently terminated at 8:15 sharp. He had planned the entire sequence before I had even stepped into the room. The hot mug of coffee sitting untouched on his desk was nothing more than a staging prop for a pre-written corporate execution. Oh, and Nathan, Gerald called out as I reached the heavy glass door of his office. Your non-disclosure agreement and non-compete clauses remain fully active under corporate policy. I trust I do not need to remind you of the severe federal penalties associated with taking or disclosing proprietary system architecture. I paused at the threshold, turning back slowly to look at the man who thought he had just engineered my total downfall. I allowed a subtle, unreadable smile to touch my face. Of course, Gerald, I said quietly. I remember every single clause of every contract I have ever signed, every single detail. It was 8:23 in the morning when I walked out of the executive suite, marking the official end of Nathan Vance as Senior Systems Architect of Apex Defense Systems. But Gerald Thornton had just committed the classic blunder that powerful corporate executives make when they mistakenly believe that owning the building means they own the intellectual soul of what someone else built. Two uniformed corporate security guards were waiting for me outside the office door. Dan Morales and Bradford Miller were two veteran guards I had shared morning coffee and casual conversation with in the cafeteria for years. Dan could not even meet my eye, looking down at his polished shoes in visible shame. Bradford had his jaw clenched tight, his hand resting uncomfortably near his belt. "I am truly sorry about this, Nathan," Dan whispered under his breath as we stepped into the elevator to head down toward the engineering floor. "This whole situation is complete garbage, and everybody on the floor knows it." Through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of the central engineering department, I could see my core development team hunched over their multi-monitor workstations. None of them looked directly up at me as I walked past, but the complete silence across the floor proved that news of my firing had already spread through internal chat channels. In a high-security defense facility where every worker holds security credentials, bad news travels fast. My private corner office looked exactly as I had left it 45 minutes prior. A ceramic mug bearing the phrase "World's Okayest Engineer," a Father's Day gift from my daughter Chloe, sat beside my primary monitor, still holding lukewarm coffee. Framed photographs lined the wooden bookshelf behind my desk. There was a photo of my engineering team celebrating our successful software deployment 3 years ago, a photo of Chloe wearing her cap and gown at university graduation, and a faded photograph of the original 4-person development team from 2006. "You have exactly 15 minutes to collect personal items only," Bradford announced, checking his wristwatch nervously. "No company files, no thumb drives, no technical manuals." I began the quiet, methodical ritual that every suddenly terminated employee undergoes. Personal items only. Nothing proprietary. I carefully removed the photos from their frames, packed them into my leather satchel, and wrapped Chloe's ceramic mug in thick tissue paper. My hands moved with automatic precision, while my mind actively executed complex tactical calculations. In the bottom drawer of my desk, tucked beneath years of archived technical conference badges and old hardware components, my fingers located a tiny, unbranded black USB storage drive. It was no larger than a house key. To any outside observer or security guard monitoring my movements, it appeared to be nothing more than a personal flash drive containing digital tax forms or family photographs. I palmed it smoothly, concealing it within the inner lining of my suit jacket with an effortless motion born of military discipline. "I hope you are not trying to remove proprietary company property," a condescending voice chimed from my office doorway. Julian Thornton was standing in the door frame, wearing a tailored designer suit that looked entirely out of place in an engineering environment. He was holding his smartphone up, actively recording me with his camera lens focused directly on my desk. "I am documenting your exit process for corporate legal compliance," Julian declared with a smirk. "We cannot afford to have disgruntled legacy employees walking out the door with valuable corporate intellectual property." I turned slowly to face him, maintaining an unreadable, completely neutral expression. Standing close to him, Julian looked even younger and less experienced than 28. He possessed the unearned swagger that belongs exclusively to individuals who have never experienced actual failure or built anything of value with their own hands. His eyes reflected the dangerous arrogance of someone who routinely mistook familial privilege for technical competence. "Good morning, Julian," I said evenly. "Congratulations on your rapid appointment to executive engineering leadership." He lowered his phone a few inches, satisfied that he had established dominance. "Yeah. Well, my father informed me that I will be taking over full oversight of your development projects starting today. He assured me that Defense Corps is not nearly as complex as you legacy guys like to pretend once you apply modern management frameworks." Behind Julian's back, Dan Morales rolled his eyes toward the ceiling in sheer disbelief. I am sure you will find the transition very illuminating, I replied, placing my last personal notebook inside my satchel. Defense Corps has extensive structural documentation. You should have no trouble navigating the codebase if your management frameworks are up to the task. You need to hand over all your master passwords and encryption keys before security escorts you to the curb, Julian demanded, taking a step forward into my workspace. His polished leather shoes clicked against the floor like a ticking clock. My father mentioned that legacy architects always attempt to sabotage system access when they get replaced by younger talent. Legacy architects. I had served 4 years in military communications and 18 years building the technological backbone of this firm, and to this 28-year-old heir, I was merely a legacy obstacle to be cleared away. All my administrative credentials were permanently revoked by corporate information technology. At 8:15 sharp, I stated calmly, if you require system access, you will need to ask IT to generate new administrative credentials for your profile. Julian frowned slightly, his brow furrowing as if he did not fully grasp the technical distinction between user credentials and structural system architecture. Whatever, he muttered dismissively. Just make sure you do not take anything that belongs to Apex. I zipped my satchel shut, picked up my cardboard box of personal belongings, and took one final look at the office where I had spent countless 80-hour work weeks. It was the room where I had debugged critical combat logistics algorithms under severe Pentagon deadlines, where I had poured 18 years of my life into creating something extraordinary. It is all yours, Julian, I said, gesturing toward the empty desk and the silent workstations. Good luck managing Layer 23. Julian blinked, caught completely off guard. Wait, what? He asked, his smug tone faltering for a fraction of a second. What is Layer 23? Nothing that an executive of your caliber needs to worry about, I answered smoothly, stepping past him into the hallway. I am certain your father will explain everything during your 11 o'clock demonstration to the Pentagon Committee. The elevator ride down to the main floor felt like descending into a completely different reality. Each floor we passed represented a chapter of the life I was leaving behind. Research and development on 15, corporate legal on 8. Where I had signed dozens of government contracts over the years, including the initial corporate licensing agreements for an independent entity named Advanced Defense Solutions LLC. That entity was a legal detail buried so deeply within complex corporate paperwork 6 years ago that even Apex's current chief financial officer had failed to appreciate its significance. The main lobby was quiet except for the morning receptionist, who gave me a look of deep sympathy as she saw security escorting me out. The revolving glass doors pushed me out onto the cold concrete sidewalk at exactly 8:38 in the morning, precisely 23 minutes after Gerald Thornton had pronounced my termination. The crisp morning air hit my face like a refreshing wake-up call. I stood beside the street, my box of personal belongings feeling surprisingly light compared to the tiny black USB drive resting safely against my chest. Inside that encrypted drive was not stolen source code or trade secrets. It contained something immeasurably more powerful. It held the original foundational patent registrations for Defense Corps' core architectural algorithms. Patents registered not under Apex Defense Systems, but under Advanced Defense Solutions LLC, with my daughter Chloe designated as the primary legal beneficiary. Under the terms of our original licensing agreement, Apex possessed exclusive commercial deployment rights to the software architecture only so long as Nathan Vance remained actively employed as Senior Systems Architect of Apex Defense Systems. Title 17 United States Code Section 106 clearly establishes that the legal copyright holder retains exclusive rights to authorize derivative works and commercial distribution. When Gerald Thornton terminated my employment at 8:15 in the morning, he did not just fire an engineer. He legally terminated Apex's conditional license to utilize the foundation of their $1.8 billion software platform. I smiled broadly for the first time all morning. Walking toward the parking garage, I looked up through the massive glass facade of the corporate building. I could see Julian Thornton, already sitting behind my old desk, likely taking photos to post about his first day as head of defense engineering. He had absolutely no idea that in approximately 142 minutes, when his father attempted to launch Defense Corps for the high-stakes Pentagon contract renewal, their corporate reality was going to implode. My pickup truck had never felt more like an operational command center. I slid into the driver's seat, placed the box of personal items on the passenger floor, and opened my high-security rugged laptop across my lap. The hum of the garage's overhead fluorescent lights hummed faintly as the laptop booted up, my fingers flying across the keyboard with the sharp speed born of 18 years of technical muscle memory. The master administrative interface of Defense Corps initialized on my screen, clean, functional, and built precisely to my exact specifications. To the untrained eye, Defense Corps appeared to be a standard corporate defense management system, handling real-time logistics, supply tracking, and encrypted troop communication. But underneath that surface layout lay 23 distinct layers of deeply integrated security protocols. I entered my primary administrative credentials, not my corporate Apex credentials. Those had been stripped away by IT at 8:15. I utilized my master developer credentials, the underlying root access keys registered when I first filed the core patents under Advanced Defense Solutions LC 6 years ago. The command line rendered green text instantly. System, architect verification. Status, operational. Layers 1 through 22, active. Layer 23, standby protocol. Layer 23 was my personal legal insurance policy, engineered into the foundational codebase from day one. While Gerald Thornton and his executive board were busy celebrating every multi-million-dollar contract renewal I secured for them, I had quietly constructed a fail-safe mechanism grounded in strict commercial contract law. The logic was completely automated and foolproof. If the registered system architect's active employment status was altered to terminated without executing a formal architectural transfer key, the platform's root licensing verification engine automatically initiated a 3-hour countdown. Under Title 29 United States Code Section 2101, workplace disruptions and structural changes require strict operational compliance. If legal licensing authorization was not reestablished within 180 minutes, Defense Corps would automatically enter protective architectural lockout mode, freezing all external data streams and rejecting all administrative access until the intellectual property dispute was formally resolved in court. I checked my phone clock. It was 8:47 in the morning. Gerald Thornton's critical $400 million Pentagon contract renewal demonstration was scheduled for exactly 11 o'clock. That left precisely 133 minutes before showtime. My finger hovered over the laptop's enter key. Once I initiated the automated countdown protocol, there would be no stopping the legal cascade. But then I recalled Julian's arrogant smirk while recording me with his phone, Gerald's cold dismissal after 18 years of total loyalty, and the sheer audacity of executive leadership thinking they could steal my life's work to gift it to an unqualified heir. I pressed enter firmly. The laptop screen updated instantly. Employment status modification detected. Initiating mandatory patent licensing protocol. Standby countdown active. 10,800 seconds. The numbers began their steady, unyielding descent. I closed the laptop, secured it in my bag, and started the truck engine. As I pulled out into the morning street traffic, I swung through a drive-through coffee shop I had frequented for a decade. The fresh roast tasted infinitely better than the cold corporate coffee sitting on Gerald's executive desk. As I drove toward downtown, my phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming messages. A text arrived from Samantha Walsh, my former lead security engineer. Just heard what happened in executive suite. This is complete garbage. The entire engineering team is ready to walk out right now in protest. I pulled over to the side of the road to reply carefully. Do not walk out. Stay at your workstations. Make sure everyone attends the 11 o'clock Pentagon presentation. Samantha replied within seconds. What did you do, Nathan? I typed back. Nothing illegal. Just allowing automated contract logic to execute its intended function. The city buildings passed outside my window as I drove directly toward the legal offices of Henderson and Associates. Waiting in escrow inside their vaults was a specific legal filing prepared for this exact contingency. My phone continued to vibrate with notifications from former colleagues, industry contacts, and corporate recruiters who had already heard rumors of my termination. I ignored them all, saving my attention for one specific caller. My phone screen displayed my daughter's name. Dad? Chloe's voice came through the speaker, bright and full of energy. Why are you calling me in the middle of a Wednesday morning? Is everything okay? Chloe was 24 years old, currently completing her master's degree in cybersecurity systems, following directly in her father's footsteps. Everything is completely fine, sweetheart, I said, smiling warmly into the phone. Better than fine, actually. Do you remember those corporate legal documents I had you review and sign 3 years ago for Vance Defense Solutions, LLC? The ones you said were full of dry legal jargon. Of course I remember, she replied. You told me it was a structural firewall to protect our family's rights in case Apex ever tried to compromise your patents. Well, those documents just became extraordinarily relevant, I explained. You might receive some high-level corporate phone calls today from people offering you absurd amounts of money. Do not answer any numbers you do not recognize. Let every single call go straight to voicemail. There was a brief pause on the line. Then, with the sharp technical intuition she had developed growing up around military systems engineering, Chloe asked softly, Dad, what did Gerald Thornton try to do to you? He terminated me at 8:15 this morning, I stated plainly, but he completely forgot to read the underlying intellectual property licensing terms. Good, Chloe said fiercely, her tone turning instantly protective. I never trusted Gerald Thornton anyway. Anyone who uses that much hair gel in a corporate office is hiding serious incompetence. Give them absolute hell, Dad. I laughed out loud, feeling the lingering weight of the morning lift completely. I will call you after my legal meeting. I love you, sweetheart. Love you too, Dad. Go get what is yours. I ended the call and checked my watch. It was 9:25 in the morning. Precisely 95 minutes remained until Gerald Thornton's world crumbled beneath his feet. The glass towers of Henderson and Associates loomed ahead. I pulled into the executive parking garage, grabbed my laptop bag, and walked into the grand marble lobby. Attorney Walter Henderson was waiting for me on the 23rd floor. We had met 3 years ago to structure the licensing firewall for Vance Defense Solutions, LLC. Nathan, Walter said, stepping forward to shake my hand with a sharp, knowing smile. I just received the automated alert from your patent repository. Shall we review our tactical options? I sat across from him in his office, looking out the massive window. 6 blocks away, the corporate headquarters of Apex Defense Systems stood tall against the cloudy sky. Somewhere on the top floor, Gerald Thornton was putting the final touches on his executive presentation. Julian was likely taking more vanity photos in my former office. And my former engineering team was sitting quietly, watching the clock tick down. 4,847 seconds. 4,846 seconds. Let us discuss exactly what happens when that timer hits 0, I said to Walter. Meanwhile, inside the main executive conference room on the top floor of Apex Defense Systems, the facility had been transformed into an elaborate technological showcase. 3 massive high-definition displays covered the front wall, showing Defense Corps' interface in crisp detail. The company's remaining senior engineers sat nervously at support terminals, while Gerald Thornton stood at the head of the polished oak table, exuding expensive confidence. Seated around the table were 5 high-ranking defense officials, comprising the Pentagon Contract Renewal Committee, led by Colonel Martinez, a sharp, no-nonsense military procurement officer whose approval was required for the $400 million contract extension. Beside Gerald, Julian Thornton stood dressed in another fresh designer suit, holding an expensive tablet and attempting to look like an experienced tech executive. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, Gerald began, his voice booming with practiced authority. What you are about to witness today is not simply software. It is the absolute future of tactical logistics and national defense. Defense Corps represents 18 years of relentless innovation, and under our modernized executive leadership structure, he gestured broadly toward Julian, who nodded pompously. We are prepared to scale this system across every military branch. Colonel Martinez leaned forward, tapping his pen against his notepad. Let us skip the marketing speech, Mr. Thornton. Show us the live tactical routing algorithms in real-time environment. Gerald nodded confidently to lead demonstration engineer Lawrence Price. Fire up the primary demonstration suite, Lawrence. Lawrence pressed the initialization key. The three massive screens flickered, loading Defense Corps' primary boot sequence. For exactly 15 seconds, the system performed flawlessly. Then, without warning, the central display flashed bright yellow. A prominent red dialog box appeared over the interface. Mandatory system architect verification required. Insert master encryption key to proceed. Lawrence frowned, his fingers moving rapidly across his keyboard. That is strange. Just a minor authentication delay. Let me override the prompt. Access denied. Invalid authorization level. What is going on, Lawrence? Gerald demanded under his breath, his artificial smile freezing as he leaned over the support desk. I do not understand, sir, Lawrence stammered, sweat breaking out across his forehead. The system is demanding master architect credentials from the underlying patent holder. Then input administrative override credentials. Gerald hissed quietly. I am trying, sir, Lawrence replied frantically. The system is rejecting all corporate credentials. It is blocking root administrative access across all 23 security layers. The screen suddenly flashed from yellow to bright crimson. A massive system message locked out the entire interface. Intellectual property licensing verification failed. Mandatory lockout active. Time remaining, 8,943 seconds. Contact patent holder, Vance Defense Solutions LLC, for system restoration. Julian, completely oblivious to the catastrophic failure unfolding before him, stepped toward the Pentagon committee with a nervous laugh. So, as you can see, modern software frameworks sometimes experience minor technical hiccups. That is precisely why my new leadership model focuses on streamlining. Shut your mouth, Julian, Gerald barked, his face turning pale before flushing red with intense panic. Colonel Martinez stood up slowly, his eyes narrowing into cold slits as he looked at Gerald. Mr. Thornton, is there a critical structural issue with your defense platform? No, absolutely not, Colonel, Gerald stammered, trying to regain control. Just a minor technical adjustment, Lawrence. Resolve this instantly. I cannot resolve it, sir, Lawrence yelled back, throwing his hands up in sheer panic. The core codebase is executing an automated security lockdown protocol. It is hard-coded into layer 23. Someone revoked the master developer license at 8:15 this morning. The entire conference room fell into dead silence. Get Nathan Vance on the phone right now, Gerald screamed, completely losing his corporate composure in front of the military procurement committee. Sir, you fired Nathan Vance at 8:15 this morning, Lawrence reminded him in a quiet, trembling voice. I do not care. Call his personal phone immediately. Lawrence dialed my number and placed the phone on speaker in the center of the conference table. The call rang 4 times before going straight to my recorded voicemail message. You have reached Nathan Vance. I am currently unavailable. If you are calling regarding the structural licensing or patent access for Defense Corps, please contact my legal representation at Henderson & Associates. Have a productive day. Gerald slammed his fist onto the conference table with such force that water glasses rattled. Colonel Martinez packed his leather briefing folder calmly and stood straight. Mr.